Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, the show where aspiring and experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is Arlene Washburn, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
April, welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. I am so glad to have you here. We just came off a Zoom call with over 50 matchmakers from around the world, really. And one thing that stood out to me is how uniquely each one of them runs their business. And it was inspiring to see so much experience and creativity, but it also made me think, maybe there's an opportunity here to unify our industry, not by making everyone do the same thing, but giving matchmakers the tools and the systems to work smarter, to collaborate more effectively, and stay rooted in the ethics and excellence of matchmaking, which is my area. And that's exactly what today's conversation is going to be about. So, you've spent over 2 decades creating lasting connections, and now you're helping fellow matchmakers scale and simplify their businesses with something revolutionary. And I saw this platform, so I am saying this with all my heart. Level connection. I can't wait to dive into that. But first, let's take it back a little bit. And for those who don't know you, which are maybe a handful that were living under a rock somewhere, let's tell them a little bit about you and everything you've done in this matchmaking world.
Well, it all started out in the covered wagon days. Okay. So, yes, I started out, more than 2 decades ago. I had an opportunity to work for a matchmaker, which then became one of the biggest matchmaking agencies in the country. And I spent about 6 years there learning what to do, but also learning what not to do at the same time. And then in 2003, I just fell in love with it so much, mostly because I come from customer service. That was a highlight of mine. I fell into other things there. I fell into sales and matchmaking and customer acquisition and retention and everything from admin to the highest level of support. And when I left, I did not intend to start my own business in 2003. I was so good at spotting talent and who went with who. And I always had sort of a strategy and a mathematical brain with matchmaking, that I thought, well, maybe I should be a headhunter. And I went to my brother's boss and I said, hey, I trust you. I admire you. I can't stay where I am. I'm thinking about becoming a headhunter. What do you think? And he said, well, April, how many marriages have you had? And I told him, and he said, you're really good at it. Yes. And I said, yes. And he said, why don't you start your own business? And I went, what? My own business? I'm not an entrepreneur. What are you talking about? And he said, if you're half as ethical and smart and hardworking as your brother, you'll be great. And he stood up, put his hand out, and said, all right, it was great, April. Get out of my office. And I drove home that day, 2003, and I got like relatively inexpensive business cards on the way home from Kinko's. And I had my first client within a week and a half. And I never looked back. And so for me, I always call myself, the reluctant entrepreneur, because I'm such a loyal person that if you get me like centered on something, I'm going to stay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for a long time. I'm very loyal to my friends and my family members. So for me, I almost had to be sort of pushed too far in order to be creative and to start to innovate. And I learned quickly that not only was I good at this, but it's something I was meant to do. And I also realized something about myself, that adversity and challenges only fuel vision for me. And so I've been working with some of the top most successful bachelors, primarily in Southern and Northern California, but some nationwide, and just really focusing on building my network of women. And so I've been the advisor and the coach and the matchmaker to some amazing men over the last 25 years. And I just keep evolving.
And you're very humble, but you have a very impressive background, and you've been on every show from Oprah to Dr. Phil to, I don't even know, the list goes on and on and on. And after 25 years in this industry, what do you think has evolved? Like, where is this industry going?
Mm.
Because I've seen a huge evolution and I've only been in 15.
Mm. Well, when I started out, there weren't, matchmaking alliances and collaborations. It was sort of like you put your blinders on and you do it yourself. You build your own network. You rely on yourself. There wasn't social media. There wasn't anybody to sort of look to as a sort of somebody that could pave the way. So we were guessing in those days, right? We were just trying to figuring it out. So to me, how it's evolved is in some ways beautiful involvement. So the collaborations, that's a gorgeous thing. I think it can be done more effectively. But also a lot more people are coming into the lane and starting their own businesses. What I fear, I love that matchmakers are getting into this. I want to support matchmakers. My biggest concern and fear is that it's becoming such a fragmented industry that it's like having streaming channels, right? We used to have one or two networks to go to for our news. Now we have thousands of opportunities to receive our news. And so it's nice in the sense of choice, but it also confuses the customer. And I think we all got into this for the customer. We wanted to serve, we wanted to make a difference in people's lives. So there's a lot of beautiful changes, but also with any kind of growth or explosion in any industry, it's going to come with the positive and the negative.
Yeah,
What do
I
you, I mean,
agree.
what have you seen in 15 as far
Yeah,
as,
collaboration for sure, because
Mhm.
most of the old school matchmakers were doing their own thing, as you mentioned. And I was one who was out at conferences speaking about collaboration. If I ever had a topic at any conference, it was, also in Europe too, because they were a few years behind in what we were doing in the US. But my topic was always collaboration. And I want to
Mm.
actually do a whole training on that because, as you said, it's so fragmented. And the way we collaborate, it becomes very challenging sometimes. And I think that we're moving towards a different way of doing things, the unification that we've discussed before, using a platform like yours, similar to the MLS, the multiple listing service, where everyone can come in, even if they build their own way of doing things on top of the system, but at least there's a level of consistency, right? In vetting, for example, like what you call vetting a client and what the other person calls vetting a client might be totally different. And you can't make assumptions, right? Because you have your own business where you're committing to doing certain things for your client. And if another matchmaker is now doing it that way, for example, running a background check, it may or may not be the right thing to do. But if someone does that and they claim to their client that they do that and then somebody else doesn't and that person's collaborating with you, becomes very challenging. So I love the system that you showed me, and I really want to talk a lot about that because I feel like that could be an answer to this problem in many
Mm.
ways.
Yeah, it's why I created it. Well, initially I created my platform for me, right? So every 7 years, it's like the 7 year itch. I get the 7 year itch in business where I have to think like, okay, what's next? What's next in technology? What's going on in the industry? What are the clients needing and wanting? Because we all shift and change, right? So
Mhm.
if we're doing things the way we did them 20 years ago, whether that's in business or in our partnerships, we're going to lose. We always have to iterate. We always have to evolve. So for me, it was I'm ready for that next evolution in my own business. So I self funded, I enrolled my husband in my vision, and we co partnered in this. And we just started building brick by brick. And we built it selfishly for us. And then it was at a conference with matchmakers that I started to kind of see a lot of disorganization, a lot of women and men who are in this industry doing too much, and then equating their pricing structure with how much busy work they were doing or
Yeah.
having to spend far too much money on staffing or recruitment, things that I felt could be handled more internally. And so quietly, I think you and I talked about this a couple of years back when we first met. Like, I think I have a solution. So I was quietly building and making my process and my platform that has worked so expertly for me for 7 years. I have more marriages than I've ever had. I still have the personalization and the high touch with all of my clients. So actually, my success rate went up. The amount of time I was spending on clients went down, but the quality of the time went up. And so I started building this to be multi-tenant for other matchmakers to grow, scale, and build their businesses with more ease and efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. First of all, yes, I remember you and I met and immediately connected. Like we have this crazy, like so much in common, even though we don't speak on a regular. It's like at any time we could check in and like, yeah, what are you up to? I'm up to, yep.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Same. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, to be perfectly honest, I've done a lot of consulting for people with apps, and often it's a tech person who's trying to develop something for an industry that they don't understand. And they think that by going around interviewing a bunch of matchmakers or creating a minimum viable product that matchmakers jump into and then start to ask for things, because I understand technology, because I've been in technology my whole life and I actually have a degree in that I don't show even on my LinkedIn. Um, I know how that becomes like a Frankenstein versus
Mm.
someone who's been in the business for 25 years, really thinking through the process of matchmaking and actually creating something that makes sense for the industry, for their business, but also for the industry. It's a very, very different thing to do that. So
It
that's why.
is.
Mhm,
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Arlene, because when you said Frankenstein, so when I think of Frankenstein, I think of like the cobbled together pieces, right?
exactly. Mhm,
And when we're going from the outside in, the build in technology isn't effective and efficient because then you're just sort of like trying to piece things on and like basically like little applications as opposed to a more holistic inside out approach. And by
mhm,
the way, being a non tech founder was fascinating because as a non tech founder who knows her business and her clientele, because this is a platform that not only serves matchmakers but is an educational tool for our clients and our database members. People are growing through this process, so it's a very much built with customer journey in mind because that was most important to me was
mhm,
having an educational platform for people. But being a non-tech founder in those early days, when I had the vision and the idea, I came home, I took data from 2 decades of matching. I literally pulled it from my own database that I had created. What were people saying? What were they asking for? What were the blocks? Why did these matches work? Why didn't they work? What words did they use? How did they respond in my meetings? So I never took my intake meetings and gave them to other people because I wanted to be there. So while I was there, I was noticing me, noticing them, and then I put
mhm,
all that into the brains of the system. And so I took my time. I went to a company and I said, help me develop an RFP. I want to go out to 4 or 5 dev shops and see like who is the best team to support us in this vision. We chose one, we worked with them for a while. And then we moved on, we went to another company, and now we've built our own internal company, which I think is like really important to talk about because
mhm,
going out with tech people who are doing other jobs, their mind is not on your business full time. It's sort of like a yes and. We've built our own internal team. It's now become something that is my full time gig. But there's also this I didn't know I could be techie, right? I didn't grow up with tech. I grew up matchmaking. I grew up in the creative world. I grew up in sales. So building technology, you really have to stand your ground and you have to say, no, no, no to your CTO. I need it this way. This is how a matchmaker thinks and feels. This is how a customer is. You need to build it this way. So I was right there, like with my hands in the mud and having to stand my ground as a non tech founder because we need that for the vision and the clay, right?
mhm.
Their job, I thought they were going to give me like the learning algorithm. They're like, no, April, you have to teach the system how
Yeah.
to think and feel. So it's been a fascinating journey. And because we're trying to unify the industry and standardize it, and I think a lot of people think standardization means the lack of personalization. It
Mhm.
does not. We all have our own flavor, our tone, our background. Like Arlene, you and I have so much in common, but we have different backgrounds, we have different voices, there's a lot of unity there, but we have our own thing. But we could be using the same exact platform, and some people will go to you, and some people will come to me because of something in our background, or it could be our education, it could be politics, it could be anything, it could be our family background. Somebody just relates with us personally. So to me, the unification means seamless collaboration. If we're all using different data points and we're using that Frankenstein model, the collaborations are a little slippery because we don't know for sure. They're not reliable and repeatable. They're more like one offs. And I want to develop something that took the guesswork out of matchmaking and put in the ease of collaboration because we're using a unified data set.
I love it. And I also, not only do I agree, I think that a lot of matchmakers would do a much better job interacting with their clients if they weren't scattered with all this administrative stuff that can be handled by a system, because that's really what the system is all about. It's about creating consistency and having your information organized in such a way that you can easily serve your client better, that you can go into one central repository and find all the information that you need for that particular client when you're having a conversation with them, and you're sending communication back and forth. And I'm a big stickler about ethics and compliance. And what I
Mm-hmm.
love about this system is that the client goes into the system to communicate with you. So there's not emails that are going to get hacked. I mean, there's a level of security. And to your point, that's where having a tech person that's a part of the team, as opposed to someone that's just dabbling into your system and forgetting what they did or whatever, like they're invested. That's a complete game changer, I believe. But also, any new matchmaker going into something like this would be like way ahead of the game. In fact, they might surpass some of the old timers if they go into a
Yeah.
system like this, because everything's laid out for you to keep you organized and on task, so to speak, right? Because there's a rhythm to and a flow to how that system is working, where what you need to be doing at any given time. When I teach matchmaking, that's the first question they say. Well, what should I be doing every day?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I mean, and also too, like I'm a really good leader. I'm a great CEO. I'm a terrible manager. And I used to conflate those two, Arlene. I used to think if you were a great CEO, you were a great manager, or you were a really good babysitter. I'm not a babysitter and I'm not a manager. So I wanted to build a system that babied me. I wanted to build a system that managed me,
you,
not the
you
other way around. And what's interesting is I'm doing the same kind of volume that a lot of other matchmakers do. And yet I'm using this technology and it's freeing me up to be one on one with my clients to do what I do best, which is advising. It helps my selection process and it just gives me that edge. And someone said, are you looking at new matchmakers or existing matchmakers? And I think when we first built it, we thought, okay, it's for matchmakers who have thriving databases, they've been at it a long time. But sometimes when we've been at something a long time, we get stuck in our old ways
yeah.
and we're so afraid to let go. And I understand the psychology of that. But the world is moving too fast. Technology is moving at lightning speed. If we as an industry and a community don't hop on this bandwagon of not using technology to replace us, but leveraging it to support us, I think we're going to get left behind, right? And so new matchmakers also, I think when we go to these seminars, they get a little overwhelmed. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I'm looking at this person and what they're charging. And maybe I should be doing that. And I should be following the social media train. And then they quit or they burn out. And
Mhm.
my role right now is where I've moved into is the support and the celebration of matchmakers. I want people to start their businesses, keep their businesses, and be here for a long time without burning out, right? It's
Yeah.
so important to our health and our mental well-being to be doing things that are good for us. And the business itself, what we're good at, why everybody came into this industry to begin with, is not currently what they're doing. So they might leave the industry because of all the admin, because they can't remember what to do next, because there's a lot of moving pieces in our businesses,
Mhm.
right? So
Especially
that's what I wanted to
because
solve.
yeah, and most of the people who do this start out as a solopreneur, and
Yeah.
so you are juggling a lot of balls, and you have to focus on the activities that bring people in. You have to focus time on promoting your business, because you can't build it and they will come. That's just not the way anything works. And so it's really interesting to me. Like, I mean, you and I talked about your system, I don't know, 3 years ago, I feel like. And you're so funny. You made the comment about not being a manager. Every time I ever hired people, I would always say, look, I'm not here to manage you. You need to manage me. If I need to manage you, I really have no use for you. Because it's
Right?
so true. I don't need to babysit another person.
Exactly. I
Lost-
mean, you and I have aging parents and husbands and dogs and businesses. And if something or someone whether it's an assistant, a team member, a partner, a piece of technology is going to come into our life, it better serve us. It
Mm-hmm.
cannot be something that we have to sort of cobble together and build out at this time of our lives, because it does require a different kind of mindset for that. So I'm always looking for ease, and I'm always looking for, how do I run my business without having to spend thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars each year on staffing
Mm-hmm.
or scouts, right? And also too, I wanted to unify everyone, because somebody who comes to you may not come to me. I just did a beautiful match for a client with another matchmaker within my system and process. We both got the messages today in the platform saying, wow, like it's almost like they want to stop here. We
Mm-hmm.
did that so quickly, so easily. She's getting paid. I got the match. She made somebody happy. Everything is automated. The only thing that wasn't automated is she talked to her, I talked to him, away we went. But whatever used to take me 2 hours now takes me 20. Whatever used to take me 30 minutes now takes me 1 minute. So I'm always thinking, how do I cut cost and how do I cut time, but still doing a very elevated, like white hand glove experience for my customers.
Right. And I think for anybody who's listening to this, especially if you're a matchmaker, this is not about losing who you are and what you do. It's about having a system that supports what you do, your particular brand and all of that. And there's a commercial, I think it is, with Mark Cuban, the
Mm,
billionaire, who says, I mean, this is a conversation about AI, and I think it's called Gemini, that the one that works with Google,
Google.
right? But it's like he's saying that, and I believe the people who are not embracing technology to streamline and to become consistent in their process, instead of being scattered all over the place and doing this, using this method for that person or that method, because when you onboard a client, you want to take all your clients through a system that is consistent. There's a workflow and everybody feels taken care of, and you are still involved, but you're organized. And really, that's what it boils down to. So when we talk about technology, is not replacing yourself like an online dating platform, because that's not what this is. The client version of it is the client going in and being able to see all of the information that has been communicated with the matchmaker, seeing all the people that he or she has already met. So they have a portal where they can see the progress in their interaction with their matchmakers. Not about them going on there and finding matches or anything like that, because God
No, no, no,
knows
no.
matchmakers and online
No.
dating platforms are not the same thing. Sorry.
Well,
Okay.
we have to talk about this.
Yeah.
For better or worse, dating apps in our time of doing this have exploded. They're on the decline, right? But they have reached the masses, and I don't know the percentages, or maybe you do, but the percentages of people who have used apps is very, very high. So we can't put the genie back in the bottle. People are used to now something that they touch. They have it in their hand. They can look at things. They can click a button. So when people say, I want a matchmaker and I want to get off my dating apps, they still want some of that ease of being able to touch and feel and sense something with the expertise and the guidance of hand selected things. So we're just trying to combine those two worlds, because we've come too far with the dating apps to just have everybody fill out profiles and then poof, all their information is gone. They don't know where it went. They don't get to ever look at it again, right? So I want my customers buy-in. I want my clients and my database members to see the data, to have a voice, to have a say in things, rather than me just saying, I'm a genie and I'm an expert, so just trust me. To me, matchmaking is a collaborative event. And I don't want to try to hide anything just to get a date out the door. I want the highest chance, the highest probability of connection. Not to say that technology or algorithms can predict love, but they can definitely predict compatibility, so that if there is physical, chemical attraction, they have a higher chance of surviving and thriving within that relationship, right? We want people to come after dates and say, wow, that was like incredible, but we actually have the real data to say we know. We know why it was incredible, because of the alignment that we already created for you. But every matchmaker is using her own spin, her own, or his, excuse me, his or her own voice and style, right? But we have to come together because the industry is begging for it. Our customers are begging for it, if you will. And this is, this is something that when you and I met 3 years ago, I was sitting down and we were all at the beach in Mexico at this conference, and I was watching all these matchmakers like running around, going, "Oh, I got to go to my room. I've got to Zoom, and I don't know where Fee. I gotta go and do this." It's like, whoa, wait a minute. I was just sitting there with my little pina colada, like, because if I'm on vacation, I need my business running for me. If I'm sick, if I'm taking care of my family, I need to know that my business, even without a human being, my business is actually being taken care of and that my clients feel handheld. And when I walk into my office, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to do it for, what is most important, and we go from there.
I love it. Let's take a quick break for a brief commercial, and then we'll come right back and talk to the amazing, gorgeous April Beyer.
Awesome.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert led instruction, accountability, and a community of like minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
So, April, I want to talk a little bit about people who are considering this career. Now, you're one of the few matchmakers from back in the day who went into this at a very early age. That's why you're so young now. Because a lot of people really do this at least in my era of going into matchmaking, I found that a lot of people were leaving careers to go
Mhm,
into this. Like I spent 20 years in pharma before I went into this. I
mhm,
know people who are attorneys, people who, did other jobs before they went into matchmaking. But what I'm
mhm,
finding now is that there are a lot of newer matchmakers coming right out of college with either a psych degree or marketing or something, going right into this. And I think that what you're doing, what I'm doing, you with this platform, me creating this program to really help people learn how to run a business and how to go, if you're coming from corporate into entrepreneurship. But what
mhm.
are the things that you would share with anyone who's actually considering doing this type of work? Because this is good work and it can be very lucrative and it can be very fulfilling, but there's a lot that people, glamorize as well. So, what would you say to anyone considering a career in matchmaking?
Oh, I used to say go to work for somebody before you start your own business. The problem with that is you never want to go to somebody who isn't doing it right because you could learn skills that are really bad for you.
Mhm.
So that would be my number one thing is maybe find a mentor, find someone like you, Arlene, to really get to know the industry so that the foundation of what they're doing is solid. Um, I would also say that I have changed my tune on people coming right out of like a degree, right? A psych degree, or let's say somebody spent 25 years in HR and they're doing it. I welcome it. I welcome the different backgrounds, especially people coming in after a long career in something, because that could actually benefit the matchmaking community. I did it differently. I came in when I was really young. I was single. Every time I went out and I'd ask a guy, like, tell me who you are and what you do, and thinking he might be a client. And he's like, listen, no, I was just trying to see if he'd date me, And he's like, no, don't qualify me. So that was my way, but it doesn't have to be everyone's way. But you've got to get support. You've got to get a community. You've got to get a mentor. You have to have a stable platform to work from. You have to be in love with people and supporting them. And you have to be willing to sacrifice. The early days of building a business mean you're going to have to be hungry on a lot of levels. It's not cushy at first. It's not glamorous at first. In fact, most days, we're, hair in a ponytail sitting in front of our computers working, right, Arlene? Like people have this vision that we're all like, it's hearts and flowers and candy. You better understand the legal aspect of what we do, the responsibility of what we do. If you're going to work with high level clientele, you have to understand their businesses. You have to understand how they've created the life that they've created. It isn't just about love. You got to go all in. You have to educate yourself. Get into this, what you do, get training, get something behind you so that you actually can be somebody that charges a fee. I see a lot of people coming in, and because they say they've hung a shingle and they're a matchmaker, that they're going to immediately start charging people. Maybe have a little bit of a war chest or a nest egg first before you launch, so that you're not desperate. You're not taking on clients you should never take on. This should never be an industry where people are saying, I have a headache client. I'm working with this person and they're impossible. When we can stop saying that, the industry will change and we will have worldwide respect. I don't take on those clients. I don't take on those clients that I think I can't serve, that are difficult, that are asking me to part from my values, whether they're my life values or my business values. And I will go hungry, and did when I started out. Like, I turned a lot of people down. I remember there was a time that I was waiting for a client. I was new in business, and he kept saying, oh, the check's in the mail, the check's in the mail. And every time I would go to my PO box, it wasn't there. And I would call him and say, where's your check? It was coming. He just kept forgetting. And I had a huge meeting at Disney Buena Vista, and I drove to my PO box, and I get there and the check's not there. And I look at my gas tank and it's a quarter full. I live in Santa Monica. I have to go to Burbank. And I started crying. I got in my car. I started crying. And then I started laughing because I thought of the visual of Fred Flintstone and Wilma in their cars where they don't have a floorboard and they paddle through town. I was like, maybe I could paddle to Burbank. But right before that day, I had turned down a client who was writing his check. Literally, those are the days of people writing checks. He was writing his check to me. I was broke. I was new. And I put my hand on his and I said, please stop. I'm not the right person for you. Because I knew he'd be trouble and I knew I would fail. And so when I talk about sacrifice, I'm saying never sacrifice your values and your ethics for money. Build your business, go out, go to meetings, go to events, build your network, build your database. Your database is your health and your wealth. And if you can't do that quickly, then they have to use my process and platform, because then you already have an integrated platform, right? So that kind of sharing is really important. So to me, it's education, getting out there in the world and doing things that are not scalable quickly, like doing those extra things before you ever give contracts, and take your time. Your sales flow doesn't have to be one call and then the follow-up call and then you sell this person. There should be no selling. Your sales cycle could be 2 weeks. It could be 4, because you're really trying to get to know these people, right? You're not going to just jump in bed with any client. People date for a year before they even think about proposing. But for some reason, matchmakers will take on a client for a year and spend 1 hour, right? We don't have to rush, and we don't have to have a scarcity mentality in order to do this business. In fact, have the opposite.
I love it. I mean, this is why you're the first matchmaker on the show.
Am I really?
Yes, because I created the show to bring awareness that this is a career that's very viable and very, very fulfilling. I mean, when you get that phone call or you get invited to a wedding, I mean, it's like next level. And it's also lucrative, but there needs to be a lot of integrity and, like you said, following laws. And every time I turn around, I hear people say things like, well, we don't want to be regulated, or we don't need more regulations. I'm like, you already have a ton of regulations that nobody's talking about, except now that I started the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, because I felt like even people who have been in the business for a very long time, because it's been somewhat under the radar as like a mom and pop shop type of thing, people felt like there's no barrier to entry, so there aren't any regulations. But that's not the case. There are a lot, and they're just business regulations. But the one thing, and I agree with you 100%. when people are looking to go into this industry, I give them two options. I'll say either become a recruiter first, because that's going to be one of the toughest things you're going to do
Mm,
as a matchmaker. Is you have to be recruiting, and you have to know how to recruit and how to get other, if you're going to hire people so that they can recruit. That's number one.
right,
Or
right.
if you're going to own a business and you don't feel you have the business acumen, get yourself a partner that will do that for you, because entrepreneurship is not for everyone, especially people coming from corporate America. They're used to having a check, and they're used to walking into a structure, and you having to create that structure. Now, if you have a platform like the one you have, that's half the battle right there, because you get a lot of structure with that. And also, we didn't get too much into it when I was looking at your system, but I'm sure there's a lot built into the actual running of a business, right? With, I didn't get to see that part. I saw a lot that I loved.
Hmm.
That's a big hurdle for people. Some people, I know people that could never own a business. Like they
Well,
would be a complete mess.
to be perfectly fair, just being good at matchmaking and loving love is not necessarily the equation for having a business.
Exactly.
It is a cold pool of water if you do not know how to run a company and you don't know how to hire and fire. Um, and that is the biggest issue I see, is that. So, in all fairness, I did work for a matchmaker. While I was working there, I was actually going out and getting my own leads. I was coming back to the office and saying, hey, there's an event. Hey, we should do this. So within that job, I wasn't just being fed leads. I had those leads that were fed to me, but I was also creatively doing that. So that's another thing. Just because you've come from a company and they've been giving you sources and leads doesn't mean you're going to then all of a sudden have that. So you better, while you're at this other company, start doing that currently. And like
Mhm.
you said, they could still keep their day job and do this at night and build this whole community and say, hey, within a year or two, I'm going to be starting to take on clients. I'd love to start getting to know you. But it's also the COO of our lives is really important. If you're not operations, you should align with that person. When my husband and I met in 2007, we were married in 2009. And right around 10, 11, he was like, okay, I've seen enough. You're so good at what you do, but I need to help you with some of the financial planning and all the background, which is why he's our CFO for the company as well, how he's going to help matchmakers in that way. But without him, I'm not even sure I could have reached these heights because, again, me being really good at matchmaking and coaching and advising didn't necessarily mean I was going to have a repeatable, standard, beautiful, foundational business. And so I got lucky by partnering with a man who's now my partner in life and love and business. But if I didn't have him, I would have sought out somebody with compatible goals, but different skill set. And I would have brought in that person who knew how to do all of that so that I could fly.
Absolutely. You have to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, or what you're not willing to do, and
Mm-hmm.
bring somebody in to do those things. And one of the questions that used to come up a lot, and I used to be somewhat conflicted about this question when I was a matchmaker. Are you in a relationship? Now, I was dating my now husband at the time, but I've had kind of a mindset shift about that, because when, I talk about being a recruiter first, because that's one of the tough things you have to do. But I think it's helpful when you're a single matchmaker too, because you can be out more. You hypothetically don't have, the household, and I mean, the kids or whatever. I don't know. I'm just thinking, because when I started this, I was out all the time. I was out, going to events and all this, and recruiting on your client's behalf. And whether or not you're single has nothing to do whether if you're a good matchmaker, because matchmaking, um, for all people listening who don't know anything about matchmaking, it is a process that you follow. There's intuition there, yes. There's organization there, yes. It's nice to have the psychology or the understanding of relationships, but that doesn't really mean that you have to have that in your own life, which is kind of how I used to think about it, right? Because I always put this pressure on myself about anything and everything. So I used to think, well, if I don't have a good relationship, then I can't be a matchmaker. So let me get my act
Mm-hmm.
together. It helps to, like if you're in this industry, it helps you to learn more and more about relationships or whatever. But Anyway, my point
No.
is that if you have a good system, if you go and get the proper training to understand how this business is done and learn some of the things that we all know, from evolutionary psychology and all these things, if you can learn all of that and incorporate all of this and trust your gut and have the intuition and come from a place of love and wanting to serve and help, you're going to be a great matchmaker, whether you're married, single, or whatever.
It has nothing to do with it. When I started out at 29, gosh, wow, 29, I wasn't married and I had just as many marriages. Like I feel like I look back at the years and me being married and having a husband has not actually increased the amount of marriages that I've had. And you're right, I had more availability. I had the time. I had the desire to be out, right? Usually, if you have a marriage, you want to be home with your partner. Thank God I have a partner who is in my business. So he never clocks out either. So ours is a little bit different, but I don't like it when people are judging matchmakers for their own personal dating status because it is about your interview skills, your vetting process, your matching skills, your work ethic, your curiosity, right? Curiosity is way more important than your dating status when you're a matchmaker. Because I put together matches and I was a single girl out there looking for love. And I had a lot of marriages in that first year or two. It has nothing to do with it.
I would go out, and we still to this day, if we go somewhere, we don't usually sit at a table. We'll sit at the bar.
We do too.
Because he and I are both very social. I think he's probably more social than I am. But if I were to see someone very attractive with no ring on, when I was a matchmaker, because you're kind of like a realtor, you're always talking about real estate, whatever. I'd be like, babe, there's a guy over there. He's very attractive. He doesn't have a ring on. And he would be like, go get him.
Mine too.
So,
Mine too.
right. Because when you have a significant other, if they are jealous and they have a problem with that, you're doing all the first dates for your clients. So,
No, I remember I was out with this wonderful new client and the meeting was like 3 or 4 hours. He was so fascinating. And I forgot the time. And the interview was going and going and going. And I texted my husband and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I'm just leaving this meeting." And he said, "Is he great?" That's all he said. "Is he great?" And I said, "You're not going to believe. Handsome, successful, kind, brilliant, funny. And yes, he wants to work with me." And he says, "Congratulations, babe. By the way, dinner is warming in the oven." I was like, okay.
that's a keeper right there. And he's gorgeous. I finally saw a picture of him. I mean, he doesn't have to worry about any of that. I think one time my husband felt a little bit uncomfortable about some shady guy that I was meeting, but I met him at a restaurant, and he sort of like showed up over there, but stayed outside. He was just like, I don't know about this guy,
Mm.
and I appreciate that. But other than that, we don't. You just don't play that game because this is a business, and you have to be very serious. If you're a single person, typically you're gonna prefer to have that client rather than trying to start a relationship with someone for the most part. Like if you're in business, you're in business and you're serious.
Yeah, let's talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
when I was a young matchmaker, I was put in positions to be out at meetings that were a little too late for my taste. The
Hmm.
only the only value of being married in this way is that it kind of gives you a little bit of a layer of protection, not 100%. But I had very, very strong rules and regulations with my staff. I could go to dinner with a client, they could not. I could
Hmm.
socialize with the client, they could not because they were young, they were single. If we did go out to dinner with a client, they were allowed one drink and one drink only. Because I myself, I believe early on, was put into some very awkward positions. And there was this one time that a client came to me and said, when I said, "Why aren't you signing your contract? It's been a month. Let's go. What's happening here?" And he said, "Well, I've been thinking about it and I so enjoyed meeting you. Why don't I just not sign the contract and date you instead?" And that used to bother me because I was there suited up, I was professional. But instead, I said, "Okay, that's interesting because I was there interviewing you and you didn't describe me at all with what you were looking for. So, what is it about me?" And he said, "Well, it's your family values and it's your curiosity and it's your warmth." And I go, "Great. I can find that in somebody else. The good news is you recognized it in me, which means I can spot it in someone else." And I said, I got a deal for you. If I match you and I work with you and I don't introduce you to a bunch of women that I pale in comparison to, we'll tear up your contract and I'll have dinner with you. But that is like as much as I'll go. And he laughed. Of course, I didn't mean it. I was joking with him. And he ended up getting married through me. So you have to be so professional because there is this line that is blurred in
Mhm.
this business. Because we're in the love business, we're in the dating business. You have to be so, so careful. I don't take meetings after 5 o'clock,
Mm.
right? I just don't. I think having an office is a really good idea. A private office where people don't know where you are, right? So there's a structure. But going to clients' homes before you know them, and especially if you have younger staff, you have to be really, really careful. And you can't just be friends with your clients. You can be personable with your clients and warm, but you can't be personal with your clients. Your clients don't care what your life is going on, what's happening behind the scenes with your marriage, with your life. You don't want to have that kind of visibility and vulnerability with a client. You're there for them and to serve them, and you have to have really clean business lines with them. Otherwise, some of them will take advantage of that, and it can be scary.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I agree wholeheartedly. And again, it's one of the things we have in common. I shut my phone off at a certain time, and you can call all you want. And I think it's important to, when you onboard a client, to provide your structure that is serving them, because even like getting the random phone calls and stuff like that, I started out, I didn't know better, and then it was like, okay, we can have a conversation once a week or once a month or whatever it was, and let's plan it. Here's a link, schedule a call with me so that I can be prepared for the call, give you my undivided attention. You're not my only client. But I see so many people, and they watch these real estate shows, which is very similar to our industry, where they're on 24/7. Any call comes in, they respond in 2 minutes or seconds or whatever. I don't think that's necessary. You can be professional, you can have your work hours, create those boundaries. And what it does is not just to have boundaries, but you need your rest. This is not an easy business.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a level of effort that most people don't realize. And so you need to refresh, you need to get some sleep, have some self-love and self-care so that you can go on and battle it out for your clients, right? Because what you're doing is you're out there. People say, I don't want to date, I'm tired of dating. Okay, I'm going to do all the first dates for you. Right? What does that entail? Meeting a bunch of people, interviewing them, asking them all these questions, vetting them, looking up their background, looking them up on social media, doing all the things that a person would do when they're dating. So that takes a lot of energy. Plus, you're running a
Mm-hmm.
business. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's so important to have those boundaries. And, obviously, if you have clients going out on the weekend and stuff like that, if you're on call, which is what we used to do, we would be on call and we would take turns, so that we were there. If somebody was running late, we can communicate because we didn't give out phone numbers and stuff like that. But my point is that that's really important. And being professional, I used to get the same thing when I was younger and cuter. I would get guys, well, how about you? Are you available? And I
Mm-mm.
would be the same way. And you have to have a thick skin in this industry because it's true. I don't know what it is about matchmaking that people just kind of lose their minds and act like this is not a profession or a serious business. And quite frankly, I can't think of anything more serious in a person's life than the person that they choose to marry or to have children with. They will make or break you with financially, with the psychologically, mental, everything. It affects everything, right? But yeah, so you have to have you have to have thick skin, but you also have to know how to respond to people to get them back in line to respect you. Which sometimes
Right.
I see how people interact and how they are, and they become really good friends with their clients and whatever. And they blur those lines to a point where it's like ridiculous.
Or they're behaving from themselves, meaning if a client is misbehaving, it's not appropriate to yell. You're
Right.
not in a fight with a client. You are a professional, right? You have to have that decorum. You have to understand. I went to a client once who was kind of verbally abusive to an assistant on the phone. This was years and years and years ago. And I came into my office and she was crying. I didn't immediately sound off at the client. I just sat with my assistant and said, "What happened? Talk to me. What's going on?" Then I called him. "Mark, what's going on? What happened? What's the story here?" So he starts telling me, and he was a little angry about something. There was a big miscommunication. And I said, okay, I hear you. Sounds like a lot of miscommunication happened earlier today, but we can solve this. And Mark, you and I, we're older, we're professionals. I only hire people who are heart centered, that want to be of service. She's really trying. It was a small, small mistake. Nothing bad happened. It was just like a little tiny communication error. Can you just dial that back a little bit? Because I need her buy in for you. She's on the phone with me. She's in meetings with me, inspiring women to want to go out with you. We're not your lawyer. We're not your CPA. You want our love and adoration and
Mhm.
respect of you. He felt terrible. The next day, my assistant got 2 dozen roses. But I didn't say, hey, buddy, you can't. And we can't be what we call, I hate the word, triggered by client behavior, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's business. And I think the business will be treated differently when there is unification, when people are more protective of their time and don't take on just anybody who has a money to
Pulse,
spend, or
pulse and some money, right?
dentists follow policies and programs and processes, and they have legal ramifications if they do things wrong. Doctors, physical therapists, every other business, hairdressers have to follow certain protocol. But matchmakers, it's like, oh, it's this big dream. I'm just going to kind of invent it and do it my own way and do it from my own feeling. And I'm going to feel good about myself because of how much I'm going to be there for my client, or how much I'm going to love and cry with my client. But we all have to realize, wait a minute, am I getting too much vitamin C from being the savior of my client? Like, then it's really about me, right?
Mhm.
These people are responsible for their own joy. And even though I've had a lot of marriages and a lot of relationships, I also don't take necessarily credit for that. We're creating connection. What they do with that connection is entirely up to them. We're opening doors. But I
Mhm.
think we're saying the exact same thing, which is you got to put your business hat on. As my mother would say, you got to put your big girl panties on. My 92-year-old mother just said that the other day. I laughed so hard. Um, and treat it like it's such, and that's when we're going to get the respect, because there've been so many times, Arlene, that I have wanted to divorce myself from the word matchmaker.
Mhm.
And yet it's, you look around us and there's beautiful people in our industry. There's people that are really working hard and doing the good work and changing lives. So we definitely need to elevate the industry. And I don't think it's changing the mind of the people out there in the world and all of the daters and the current clients and future clients. I think it's changing from within. Once we change from within and unify and all follow the same rules and protocols, the rest of the world will wake up and say, I see the value and the respect of a matchmaker,
Mm.
right? And why it's important to invest my time and energy and resources into this level of a search.
Mic drop. Yeah, I I agree. And if I have anything to do with it from now until I retire, that is my number one mission: is to bring ethics and compliance and not uniformity, and that's not a good word, because I love the uniqueness of all the different matchmakers. Unification, which is what we
Unification. That's what my business is all about, right? Yep.
exactly. And I'm going to spend more time with you looking at that platform. But what I saw was amazing. It first of all, it's visually beautiful because, and I'm sorry, that's not a frivolous statement, because I myself and most people especially who are not techie, like I had access to this database with all these people that for business, and I couldn't even go into it because it was so ugly. I'm I'm a visual, right?
Mm.
So something like that. It's beautiful, and then it's organized. I I'm self-diagnosed ADHD. Nobody has
Mm.
ever diagnosed me, but I think I have it, some sort of neurodivergence, because can't take too much of like.
Mm. Mm.
So
Me too.
so I think that your platform has those things, but then I saw, okay, you need to do this. It's this, like you can open up to a screen that is helping you stay organized, stay focused. For me, like anyone new going into matchmaking, if they go into a system like that, that's a game changer, because most people are trying to reinvent the wheel and trying to figure it out. And it may take years, years. when they don't have to.
Yeah, I did all the hard work for everybody. I invested my time, my energy and resources and all of my faith and grit and will into something. And also, even though I've recently launched it to matchmakers and we have new matchmakers currently working in it, I've been using it for several years already. The only thing that is new is the involvement of other matchmakers. And it's really about matchmakers who want to run their businesses in a better way, serve their clients on a higher level, and collaborate seamlessly. We think of this almost as like crowdsourcing for matchmaking as well,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody who might come to you maybe didn't come to me. And so if we can kind of have more visibility, it's important. During a meeting earlier today, we were talking about client to client matches. And I said, I am always the first person to say, this lead that I'm sending you, client Bob, comes from my friend and colleague, so and so. And I want him to know. So if I'm not coming from this like protective fear and scarcity of what if this person leaves me? What if they like this person? I was never like that when I dated. I'm not
Right.
like that with my husband. I love it when my friends go, your husband's really cute. They talk with him. I don't have a scarcity mindset.
Right.
Because when you have a scarcity mindset and you don't want visibility, you're a protectionist, you don't grow, you don't scale, you stay small, and you don't have the support for your vision. Now, I believe more than ever before, we all have to come together as one to make this industry work and make it work well. 100%.
I agree wholeheartedly. And let's not forget that we go into this industry to help people find love. So by unifying and giving exposure to people who are in your database, or collaborating with another matchmaker who has a client that might be a good match for your client, you are living the mission of creating these connections. But if you're on your own over there and not getting this access, it just prolongs the ability for that dater to find love. And I would encourage any daters who are listening to this to ask their matchmaker, like, do you collaborate? Because honestly, there are people out there still who refuse. They have the blinders on. They remind me
Mhm.
of oh gosh, I forget the Netflix show that was on where the matchmakers were all fighting with each other because they had territories. I forget
Mm,
the name of the show, but anyway,
mhm.
I think Bonnie Winston was one of the she helped to create that
Oh.
the
Mhm.
show. They She consulted on that show, but
Mhm.
that's what it was like back then. Modern matchmaking is all about collaboration, similar to real estate. You have a buyer, I have a seller. Boom,
Yes.
let's collaborate. Everybody wins. So,
Yes. Yes, but it's how we're collaborating, because the current form of collaboration is really time consuming, inefficient, and it's not repeatable. It could take hours to do one action. And I think we're just all too busy for that. As much as we love meeting with other matchmakers, right? It's fun. They're just a beautiful, beautiful bunch of people in this industry. And I'm really excited. I know we're talking about a lot of things that have gone wrong, but there's a lot that's right. And there's a lot of wonderful, smart, able, capable people that are here for the right reasons in our industry. And that makes me very, very excited.
yeah, I agree. And I am excited to see what you're going to do with this platform and I hope to be a part of it just because I was so impressed with the quality of it. And for anyone who's listening right now, who's a matchmaker, who is very interested in this level of collaboration and having something. Yeah, by the way, I've heard so many people say, I'm building a platform. Yeah, go ahead, go spend $1 million. Maybe you'll get something half as good. Like, don't
Yeah.
do it. Just get into something that already exists, that's been perfected by someone who's been doing it for 25 years. And don't just go by the ones that are created by people who don't understand our business and then create these Frankenstein type, platforms. It's just not worth it. But for anyone who would love to have a conversation with you about what is the best way for them to reach you.
Reaching me at hello@levelconnections.com and simply referencing you, Arlene, in this podcast would be really
Oh,
helpful.
awesome. I'm so happy to make that connection, because I am a matchmaker at
Connector.
heart.
I love what you're doing, Arlene. I'm just so glad you're in this world and in this business. And like you said, I felt so connected to you right away. And it's always such a pleasure and an honor to chat with you.
Thank you. And I feel the same way. I feel like we have that integrity core value in common. So we're a match. We may not be able to talk on a regular, but I think about you, and hopefully you'll come visit me. You're West Coast, I'm East Coast, but we get together at least once a year or more now. We keep running into each other at these conferences.
Mm.
I am so excited for what's ahead with Level. I'm excited what's happening in the industry, and I'm excited to bring more people in, because despite everything you heard, there are not enough matchmakers, at least really good professional matchmakers. I feel like there's so much room for so many more people to come into the business. And with this type of platform, if you're a new matchmaker and you go into a platform like this, you're home free. It makes your life so like exponentially easier. If I had something like this when I went into the industry, it would have shaved off, years of trials and tribulations. So
Mm.
thank you so much, April, for being on. And of course, we'll include your information in the show notes. And I hope to have you back.
Oh, thanks, Arlene. That's amazing. I so appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.